I used to spend a lot of energy trying to use things the right way. This is a Hobonichi cousin I started using in 2014, originally as a fairly straightforward planner. But somewhere along the way, I stopped trying to use it the right way, and then the relationship shifted. I'm Julie. Welcome to these pages where I followed my life through notebooks, slowly and by hand. Before that shift happened, using a notebook came with a kind of background effort, not in an obvious way, more like a quiet monitoring that followed me while I was writing. Am I using this page the way it's meant to be used? Does this belong here or somewhere else? Even when nothing was technically wrong, there was a low level sense of checking myself as I went, keeping things aligned, making sure the notebook still looked like the version of me I thought I was meant to be consistent with. That could look like hesitating before writing something down or rewriting things so they fit better, and sometimes skipping a note entirely because I wasn't sure where it should go. From the outside, everything still looked fine, but inside, the notebook felt a little like something I had to keep up with, rather than something I could simply return to. At the time, it didn't feel like a decision. There wasn't a moment where I decided to make it more creative or to push against any rules. What changed was quieter than that. I stopped checking whether what I was doing counted as correct. Pages didn't have to match each other anymore. Days could look different without needing an explanation. And I didn't feel the need to justify why something ended up here instead of somewhere else. That small release changed how I showed up to the notebook long before it changed how the notebook itself looked. When I first started using it, I approached it the way I'd learned to approach planners. There was an idea of a right way to set things up, a right way to keep up, and a quiet belief that consistency meant perfection. You can still see traces of that early on in how structured it is and how clearly the intentions come through on the page. Early on, the blank pages bothered me more than anything else. This notebook was dated, and I thought that meant I was supposed to show up every day, exactly where the date told me to. When I didn't, the empty weeks felt like evidence that I was doing it wrong. For a long time, I saw those pages as something I'd failed to use. Much later, I started to see them differently, not as missed days, but as open space I could return to, pages I could write on later, draw on, paste into, or leave untouched without it meaning anything about me at all. And for a while, that way of using it worked, not because it was perfect, but because it made sense for the life I was in at the time. What didn't belong yet simply hadn't arrived. For a long time, nothing dramatic happened. I didn't suddenly change how I used the notebook, and I didn't decide to abandon the structure either. What changed first was my comfort with letting things stay unresolved on the page. There were entries I didn't know where to place, so I left them where they landed. Notes that didn't quite fit the day they were written on. Pages I returned to weeks later and recognized, even though my life had already moved on. Sometimes I'd open the notebook after a break and feel slightly disoriented, not because anything was wrong, but because it no longer matched the version of me who'd last written in it. Instead of fixing that mismatch, I let it be there. That was new. Not as a principle and not as a rule, just as a small, repeated choice to keep writing without first deciding whether it belonged. The notebook started to hold gaps, overlaps, and contradictions, and I stopped trying to smooth those out before turning the page. Over time, that certainty loosened. Planning started to blur into thinking. Thinking drifted into notes, and some notes landed next to things that didn't really have a category at all. I didn't stop using the notebook. What changed was that I stopped asking it for permission. And somewhere in that overlap, without a clear moment or a clean boundary, it stopped being something I followed and became something that followed my life instead. What you see now isn't a system, it's accumulation. When I handle it now, I notice things I wouldn't have noticed at the beginning. The notebook doesn't open flat in the same way. Some sections offer a bit of resistance. Certain pages fall open more easily than others, as if they remember being returned to. There are places where the paper feels softer from use, and others that still feel almost untouched. You can sense where time gathered and where it passed quietly without leaving much behind. Flipping through it isn't about revisiting individual entries anymore. It's more like moving through layers. Early intentions sit underneath later revisions. Past priorities brush up against things that arrived much later. Nothing has been cleaned up to make it tell a single story. And that's what gives it weight. Not because everything in here is important, but because nothing had to prove its importance in order to stay. This notebook matters to me now, not because it was used well, but because it was allowed to change. I wasn't required to stay the same. Consistency wasn't something I had to prove. The notebook stayed useful by staying flexible, by letting different parts of my life show up without being corrected. I don't come back to this notebook to remember how I planned. I come back to it because it holds evidence of how I lived once I stopped trying to get it right. And there are other notebooks and other moments where that same shift shows up in different ways. Thank you for being here, and come walk with me into the pages still waiting.